Good morning, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started, mindful of your time. Thank you for joining us promptly. I'm Vincent Atchity, CEO for Mental Health Colorado, and happy to have you here with us. This is our monthly reports and updates meeting for allies and partners around Colorado who are working on disentangling mental health and criminal justice. Please, if you would, as we're about to get started, go ahead and enter your name and affiliation in the chat as kind of an introduction to one another. We've got somewhat of a smaller group today than we have in the past, and maybe some more folks will join as we're getting going. But I'm going to begin by handing this over. What we do is we have a presentation each month from someone in the state who is doing important work in disentangling mental health and criminal justice. And then we have some time for questions and discussion and updates from other partners on the line. And the guarantee to you is that this is a brief meeting that we start as promptly as possible, and we'll wrap up no later than 15 past the hour. So thank you again. This morning, it's my great pleasure to introduce Sarah Erickson, who's Director of the Diversion Counseling Program with the 18th Judicial District Attorney's Office. Thanks so much, Sarah, for joining us this morning, and go ahead and it's all yours.
Great. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'm going to share screen and hope this works. Hoping everyone can see that. As Vincent said, my name is Sarah Erickson. I work at the District Attorney's Office in the 18th. So we cover Arapahoe, Douglas, Elbert, and Lincoln. I'm hoping that as I go through these slides, that if anybody has any questions, they'll please just speak up. When doing the slide presentations virtually through Zoom or whatever other platform, I do condense a lot of information onto slides because you can read it easily while I'm speaking. I'm happy to make this slideshow available afterwards if there's information that you want later that you don't see. I talk fast, so please interrupt me as I go. I am the Director of Diversion at the 18th. That means that I'm also a district attorney, so I have that experience as well. Whenever talking about diversion, I always like to talk first about a summary of what the DA's office does in the criminal justice system. Again, this is a lot of words, but really what it's telling you is that as the executive branch in criminal justice or in law enforcement, what we do is make the accusation that the law has been violated, and then we have to back it up. If someone wants to challenge us on whether or not the law has been violated, in that process, we get to make a lot of decisions about how to proceed on a case. And one of the important options that we have in Colorado as a district attorney's office is deciding whether or not we need to use the formal criminal justice system in order to seek resolution or justice in a case, or if we can use other options. And when we talk about what those other options are, that's what we mean when we talk about diversion. Obviously, when having these conversations, it's important that you know who your DA is. Your DA is elected. In the 18th, our elected currently is John Kellner. That's this gentleman here, and not the most popular DA in the country, this gentleman here. When we talk about justice, one of the things that I think is hardest to, or to me is also the most interesting part of thinking about the criminal justice system, is what justice is. I really like this slide because I think it's an easy way to capture that there's not always agreement on what justice is, and it really depends on what your position is and where you're coming from. Part of the challenge of the district attorney's office is hearing all of those different perspectives of justice and ultimately deciding what it's going to look like in our system. I think that's important to highlight in Colorado because, again, the DA is elected. So they have to share what their vision of justice is in criminal justice. And then we, the local voters, get to decide whether or not that's someone that we want to put in charge of the system and these important decisions or not. In the 18th, diversion is an alternative to traditional prosecution. So we look to resolve cases and establish justice without courtrooms. We try to minimize the role of lawyers, making the role of person who caused harm and victim, identified victim of that harm, to really play center stage instead of lawyers and instead of the focus on process. We're going to go through a little bit how we do that. I do want to highlight, though, that there are different diversion programs across the state, and we all look different because each diversion program is established under the district attorney's office. Those programs tend to reflect their individual communities and their community's needs, as well as, again, what that community has said they want justice to look like. So there's no two diversion programs that are the same. Diversion goals, what are we trying to do? We do early intervention and prevention. And prevention for us is keeping people from coming back into the system. Obviously, traditional prevention work in our sphere happens before law enforcement is involved, before charges are referred. For us, prevention is stopping it from occurring again. We follow principles of effective intervention. So we are really focused on outcomes. And in our program, we use the risk needs responsivity model. For those not familiar, risk tells us who we need to target. The need tells us what we need to target. And responsivity tells us how to target that need. We try to stay as close to that model as possible in figuring out what our lane is and how we're going to respond to cases. We are looking for meaningful accountability in all of our cases, and we do that through restorative justice. That's not really going to be the focus of this talk today, but it is sort of a foundation of how our diversion program works. I think really what it means for purposes of today is that if someone says that they did not commit the law violation that the DA's office is accusing them of, then they're really not appropriate for diversion, because diversion does not have a role of truth seeking. It does not have to follow rules of due process. Defendants and victims don't have the same legal rights in diversion as they do in court. So for all of those reasons, if there is there's a lack of agreement around accountability for alleged offenses, those cases truly need to stay in court and not be in diversion. We do have a focus in diversion of balancing both what services and supports we provide to the person who is alleged to have committed the crime and is being responsible for their own behavior in that, with victims' needs, which looks very different than in a courtroom. Part of the diversion model is that we are looking to reduce collateral consequences. Some of that is through records. Records get sealed or expunged in diversion, but some of that is also in how we work intentionally to re-engage people into their communities. That's that important reintegration part. And of course, the overall goal of any diversion program is to increase public safety. How we do that? We start in diversion with an assessment. We then work to match those needs with services. And again, that important part of we do an accountability process through restorative justice. The R&R model for us, that gets, where in that framework that's matched up is with our assessment and then service matching aspect of the program. And then again, the accountability through restorative justice. All program participants, this is just sort of a view overall again of how it works. Everyone's screened and assessed. Everyone has to agree to participate in some type of restorative justice practice. If there is a criminogenic risk that's identified, I should say risk in need, then that participant will also have a plan in diversion to mitigate that risk. Obviously, not everyone who comes into the criminal justice system has criminogenic risks and needs. We are not looking to overservice or to put people into treatment if it's not tied to essentially what we believe our role is. We're trying to stay in our lane. So some people, a lot of people in our program just do a restorative justice practice, and that's it. Others will get this additional side, which is the focus on reducing that risk and need. We let people choose to work with our staff internally, or they can choose to work with somebody in the community, as long as that community member will agree to essentially a release of information so that we can have conversations about progress. When I was thinking about what I wanted to focus on for this group, I am selfishly going to try to fly through some of this information because what I really want is some help. And in order to give you a framework of the help that I need, I think I want to start with talking about how we normally see or hear the behavioral health system and the criminal justice system working together. And that's sort of this overlap. But what I want to suggest to you today, that based on my experience in the DA's office and in diversion, it really looks something more like this, where it is entwined in ways both tied to individual cases, but also based on how systems in Colorado have developed. Oftentimes that looks like the criminal justice system being the access point or the front door to behavioral health services. Excuse me. I have terrible allergies. I hope I'm not the only one on here suffering today from whatever this allergy thing is in the air. So one thing that I like to highlight when thinking about mental health or behavioral health and diversion is that for us, mental health or illness is not a criminogenic risk factor. Unsupported mental health or the lack of an effective framework to support each other in our mental health needs is a criminogenic risk factor. I like to say that traditional methods of treating and supporting those with behavioral health needs, like therapy, sometimes medication, can be highly effective in mitigating criminogenic risk. But that's because the treatment model looks the same, not because the driver is the same. Meaning, just because we're using therapy to mitigate risk does not mean that the risk comes from mental health or mental illness. I think when you look at our system or my experience in the system in the 18th, that makes me focus on the framework or supports, lack of supports being the criminogenic risk and not the mental illness or mental health need, is that when we look at the population within the criminal justice system, we know that poor people with mental illness end up in the criminal justice system at much higher rates than rich people or resource-rich people with the same needs. And I think that that distinction is really important. Who we are in diversion. So our program within the DA's office is, we are direct service providers. And what that means is that our team is made up of master's level therapists licensed with the state. We do have 2 case managers, 2 victim advocates, and then the administrative side. Our program has offices in Centennial at the Family Resource Pavilion. We are in Castle Rock, Littleton, and most recently we have an office in Aurora. Here's some dense slides. What we're really focused on is creating individual plans for our participants, focusing on accountability, reducing risk, and increasing well-being. And we do it through case management, traditional therapy, specialized therapy modalities. We try to use a lot of experiential therapy, primarily with the juveniles or the youth in our program, obviously accountability. And because for a good portion of our population, we're talking about kids, that means we do a lot of school advocacy. What I really want you to notice about this is that no 2 people within diversion will ever have the same plan. That's because we're all coming into the system with different needs or different backgrounds. So we really focus on making sure that we are focusing on the criminogenic risk, but also making sure that we're tailoring what the plan will be to the individual. We create the plan with the participants so that they have buy-in and a say on what the expectations are going to be in diversion. When we think about the accountability in diversion, I always, in every presentation I do, want to make sure that we don't forget the impacts of crime on our communities and on individuals. And these impacts do not change based on the specific individual characteristics of the person who committed the crime. These are universals for victims and communities. Real quickly on how we're doing that accountability, we're using restorative justice models and not retributive justice, which is what we would call the traditional criminal justice system. If anyone wants to geek out on restorative justice, I would love to do that in another conversation, but we're not going to do that here today. Numbers, everyone's always interested in numbers. So in 2020, here's the numbers in the 18th for cases. These are juvenile cases filed. We took 40% of the cases from the traditional track into our diversion program. 2020 and 2021 in the criminal justice system, we have lower numbers than we typically do. In an average year pre-pandemic, our diversion program took around 600 kids, but still we aim for that 30 to 40% mark of taking all filings out of the system. We do take juvenile sex cases in our diversion program. We average around between 50 and 60 a year. We currently only have one SOMB provider on staff. We would like to have 3, but we are not unusual for treatment or mental health support, and that we have challenges with staffing right now. I'm sure many of you on this call can relate. In our program, part of what's different for us than other diversion programs is that we have committed to following the SOMB treatment standards, which means that the treatment aspect for juveniles is going to be the same whether or not they're in court. If they are adjudicated and end up on probation or some other type of sentence, they'll get the same type of treatment in our program. And we do that because we don't think it's right to tell victims that if because the person who harmed them is getting the benefit of diversion, it means that they will get less treatment, or that they can expect fewer rules, or that we're going to make it up as we go. So that consistency part is important for us. Outcomes. So these are outcomes for youth. We'll get to adults here in a minute. We are evaluated on an annual basis by the state, and then we have contracted for program evaluations historically on specific questions that we've had. Every evaluation that we've ever had has shown that our program positively impacts the youth in all of the domains that have been measured. Recidivism is an easy number, although I would argue it's not the best number to reflect the work that we're doing, but we're still really proud of our recidivism rate. For those who successfully complete the program, that's 6.7%. I do like to highlight, though, that even kids that do not successfully complete our program, the recidivism rate is still only 8.9%. And I think that that says something about the types of cases that we're pulling out of the criminal justice system, and also that we are working really hard to set kids up with supports and services. Even if they don't successfully complete our program, we want to make sure that they have those resources regardless. We also, important, especially nowadays, to highlight that in all of our evaluations, we have been found to be equally effective regardless of gender, age, or race. So adults, adult diversion has always been present in the 18th, but not in a formal way. In 2017, we intentionally, sort of formalized our process to take more adults out of the system. Easier to talk about who we're not taking DV cases, felony crimes of violence, sex offenses, and DUIs, or those cases that we think they may be better served through the specialized courts here in the 18th. we do the same model for adults that we do for kids, meaning we're going to do a restorative justice practice, and then we're going to look at that risk need responsivity model. When John Kellner was elected DA, he intentionally set out to expand adult diversion opportunities. And where we started was with our adult recovery diversion program. We're going to go into that one a little bit in depth here in a second, but we are also working on expanding models where we know that problematic behaviors are tied to unsupported mental health or mental illness. And we are also working on models to pull out cases where competency has been raised. There's some overlap between those two populations, but not always. So we're looking at two separate programs there. So adult recovery diversion, a lot of words here, but in summary, we're looking to pull out adults who have possession of drug charges. We don't care if it's a misdemeanor, which they mostly are nowadays, or felony level. What we want to do is to pull them out of the criminal justice system and enter them into an expert model. So the screening, brief intervention, and then connected to treatment process. And really what we're focusing on is not following these individuals through the criminal justice system or any other system to the completion of treatment. Our goal is to connect them to treatment and to ask that our community step up and provide the services and support so that the criminal justice system doesn't have to do that work. I want to say thank you up front to All Health Network, who has been our partner in our adult recovery diversion pilot. We do, once we get deep enough into this, have a plan for program evaluation. And once that's completed, that'll be something that will be shared publicly. Eligibility, again, we're not saying you can't have any criminal history, and we're not saying that you have to be sober or have demonstrated sobriety to participate in our program. But we want to make sure that they are not under the supervision of any other system. And that's because diversion best practices, well, we just know that it doesn't work if diversion is supervising somebody and there's another system also supervising them. And we're recognizing that, we are still in a part of a court process. So there's lots of people who get to weigh in, and we want to make sure that people are informed in deciding to be a part of our process. So we have that criteria for everyone to see. I recognize that I am dumping just a lot of information, but I really wanted to use this opportunity selfishly to talk about where I need help. When we designed our recovery diversion model, we, like I said, intentionally designed it to switch the treatment provision for substance misuse away from the criminal justice system and back to the community. We frequently hear one of the criticisms of the juvenile justice system is that we should not be the #1 behavioral health service provider in the state, and we agree. So what does it look like, or how does it work when we try to switch that dynamic back to the community? And that's the idea that we're testing with our recovery diversion program. And I need help in that transition. We have referred 113 cases in our pilot program to the recovery diversion process. The process being that we tell the defendant or their defense counsel in most cases that they're eligible for the program, and that if they want to participate, they need to contact All Health Network to set up an intake. Of the 113 cases referred, only 25 people have contacted All Health. And it doesn't matter of the people that we've referred, whether or not they're represented by defense counsel, meaning we're not seeing more follow-up for those with defense counsel than those without. Interestingly, of the 25 that did follow up, 25% of that group did not need substance abuse treatment per the treatment level assessment that All Health is using, the ASAM. Of those that did not follow through, 58 have either picked up new offenses or have active warrants out for their arrest because they failed to appear for multiple court dates. I like to highlight where our program is not working to try to help generate ideas of how we can make this better. Some would argue that our recovery diversion program is doing the opposite of what it's intended to do, in that the number of participants, there's a high number of potential participants that now have warrants out for their arrest that may not have had them out before. Others, including the courts, have suggested that that's not a fair measurement because this population potentially had a low follow-through rate regardless of our program. But it is concerning to me that of the population that we think would be appropriate to resolve their case and also get support out of the criminal justice system, they're not able to access, or for whatever reason are not taking advantage of the opportunity. We do have the ability to look and see how other models have worked. Like I said, we've been doing adult diversion informally for a number of years, and that has included drug cases. And what we know is that when we take those cases into our traditional program, they do have a much higher rate of follow through and engaging in treatment. What I don't know is why, and we're trying to answer that question. So at this point, I'm tired of hearing myself talk, and I would love to hear ideas from other people on models of compliance that exist that do not rely upon the criminal justice system to be the heavy or the stick, if you will. I'm also interested in understanding what you all as experts think I should be looking for in treatment providers to demonstrate their ability to engage clients and keep them in treatment, again, without the criminal justice system as the fallback. I also am interested in if you have any thoughts or ideas on what community-based treatment providers need in order to engage the highest need, and oftentimes that means higher risk populations, without the door or the leverage of the criminal justice system.
Well, Sarah, thank you so much for a great presentation. And these are all great questions. So here's an opportunity, folks, to chime in, whether in the chat or out loud, with any responses or questions.
I have a comment.
Yeah.
Hi. Hi, Sarah and Vince. My name is Alan Marshke. I'm with the forensic support team with CDHS. And, just kind of on your last piece there, right? The highest need individuals without necessarily involving or kind of forcing criminal justice involvement. And one of the programs that I've been, working somewhat tangentially with, but am very eagerly watching their success is the COACT team in Denver. And it's an AOT model, which is I think designed to engage really the unengageable, right? The really high need folks. And it's through the civil court and using, the civil certification process and the court-ordered meds in lieu of the criminal system. And in Denver, they've created a really nice, and I'm sure I'm going to misrepresent it, but a very symbiotic relationship with the district attorney's office, so that when folks are accepted into this program and their care kind of then becomes somewhat responsible to the probate court and the civil court, the district attorney's office has agreed in a lot of cases to dismiss their criminal prosecution in lieu of treatment first. And that team, I think the COACT program has like a 1 year, again, I'm sure I'm going to terribly misrepresent it, but like a 1 year model where they're following folks through their probate case and offering really high intensity, it's ACT, so a sort of community treatment services locally. And then I'm really curious, I'm going to try to make it to the conference later this year down in Texas, but just as a national model, how much outcome success these teams are having with the really high acuity, high need folks in lieu of criminal justice interventions. Just a
I
thought.
really appreciate that. I'm watching that program too. I'm often jealous of Denver because they have the one county, one judicial district set up. So sometimes their collaboration with their counties, that civil side of the system looks a little bit different, but I agree. I think that'll be, I'm crossing my fingers for them. I want them to be successful.
Hi, Sarah. It's Laura Sinconi in Douglas County. Good
Hi,
to
Laura.
see you. Alan beat me to the punch. The first thing that popped into my mind was an AOT model as well. It's something that we've been thinking about in Douglas County. And I know there's probably folks on the call that know a lot more about the ins and outs of AOT than I do. I'm still kind of researching that model, but what I do know is there can be kind of two different versions of that. You could have a psychologist, mental health forward AOT model. You could also have a judicial led model, or you could maybe create some sort of approach that blends the two. And the reason we've been talking about it in Douglas County is we've been running for about 1.5 years at this point, an enhanced care coordination model called the Care Compact. And this is the population in your third point: high risk, high need, typically co-occurring or dual diagnosis individuals. And about 40% of the 60 people we've served so far have criminal justice involvement. And a lot of them are on certifications, though not everyone on a cert is also involved in the justice system. So we've been thinking about ways that we can kind of meet people where they are in the community and have a more coordinated approach. So my thought on the third point is enhanced care coordination, where you have a strong system of information sharing across multiple agencies and multiple disciplines that can contribute to a shared care plan and really follow these individuals in the community. I mean, we see a lot of good outcomes for our clients that are able to connect to ACT, where there is that ongoing case management and support. And often they just kind of need a little bit of case managing to get to a point where that service is available. But the gap is the case management and the coordination among systems. So I'd be happy to connect and talk to you more about this, but that's just what came to my mind.
Laura, I'm wondering if part of the conversations that you've been having, when you talk about coordination of systems, does the criminal justice system have to be there? Is there a way to do it without the criminal justice system?
I think that there may be, and in talking with All Health Network, I think that's the preference, is that it's more of the mental health led community-based model. We just have yet to kind of figure out the process by which someone is moved from the justice side to the community and the community picks up. But that's something that we want to do.
Jean, I see you have your hand up.
Let me unmute, I'm sorry. So couple thoughts. So I think looking at your model, look at what you're asking in terms of your application process. You are focusing on possession cases, and maybe I just don't see the application that you have for people. So you're looking at things that are more what you're ruling out versus looking at what the person needs. And so as a result, you're getting individuals who have an addiction, but you're not bringing partners to the table. And this is in no way, shape, or form a comment on any mental health center, but there is a general issue. And if you recall, I in collaboration with Mental Health Colorado, run a shelter project called Safer. And our people are technically your people who should be in your diversion project, but would possibly be ruled out because of the other pending cases going on. You're losing a lot of people because of other pending cases, and it's more because of where they're at and what are the demographics. And I use that word very broadly. I'm not talking stereotype, race, Hispanic, not female or whatever, LGBTQ. I'm talking about their demographics in terms of what their needs are. So are you looking at, is it a housing issue? And I'll just put that up first in front. People may be saying they have housing, but they probably are if you're focusing on the addiction end. And people with other behavioral health issues, they are couch surfing. People get tired of where they're at. So are people being eliminated? And it was one of the bills that was just passed to expand the diversion projects for the DA's office, but there was no money put into it to do supportive housing services. So you are going to get people who are successful in the diversions or selected for the diversion projects who are housed. And then you are automatically looking at people of a different income level to be able to address those. So if you want to gain trust and successfulness, you can't force them to go to a mental health center. Our people that we have as our participants in our shelter project, it takes us 2 to 3 months for them to feel comfortable enough to want to reach out to a mental health provider. So if that's the starting point for this population, they're not going to be there. That is a barrier to begin with. It is a disconnect. We are, as a state, what is our last statistics? 50th now, for a reason. And so you can't have all health or any behavioral health entity be the starting point, because that trust isn't there for a variety of reasons that's built up for quite a few years. It would be no different than to say, oh, go to a law enforcement officer and sign up. I'm just calling it. So it really does. And it's not a commentary of what they do or don't do. It is the development of where we're at as a state and the trust and the lack thereof our people have. So who else should be on your team? I don't see any peers. So you have truly a need for truly not just anyone calling themselves a peer, but truly someone who has been certified not only by the state, but also national certifications in the addiction and mental health arenas. So they can walk alongside of the people in the project, but you also have to provide some kind of bridge housing for them where they can feel safe so they can start getting engaged with peers and addressing their basic needs. And once you start addressing basic needs, because if you're getting picked up in the addiction, you're going that route, that is a mental health issue. And so their basic needs aren't being met is probably also why they're not continuing to respond. So gaining the trust in terms of just simple things, hygiene things, a pair of clothes, food on a regular basis. They are looking at making their immediate needs being taken care of, as opposed to appearing for a diversion project, because that's what they're living for on a day-by-day basis. They're like, how am I going to make it to the next day while I still have this addiction issue going on? Unless your target population is the one-time experimenter. And I'll just share with that, we're going to see that much anymore. Our level of, and I know my colleagues will probably shoot me for this, but I am not a proponent in any way, shape, or form to making any substances illegal. But on the other hand, we are being very cavalier and not looking at the high level of concentration marijuana is and how it's affecting a lot of our people with mental health issues. And I think a lot of education needs to go there. And this is what our people you're trying to get into your diversion project are really struggling with, that high concentration level and trying to meet basic needs and all those barriers that get exacerbated because of that. So I think I've got on my soapbox there, but I apologize. But I think housing, basic needs, peer mentoring as being probably your first step, as opposed to any mental health agency for an application.
So it's really interesting, Gina. I think part of what you're highlighting is this weird growth point in Colorado for specifically around diversion programs in criminal justice, because there's lots of pressure on one side for diversion programs to have the smallest touch possible. Because when you don't comply with the diversion program, the consequence of that is court. So the push is for diversion programs to have the fewest requirements and the lowest numbers of, I hate the word, but it's what, touches with the participants as possible. So really in the 18th, we have 2 adult diversion programs. We have the recovery diversion pilot, which is really looking at that model of, we don't ask people to apply. We just send them the referral information if their charge is appropriate. So we don't ask for any other information about them, because when we do, then we as the criminal justice system collect that information. And there's some concern that that can be used for them, but also against them. And it's also why what we're looking for in that program is for them to connect to treatment. We don't ask for UAs. I don't ask for them to complete treatment. We're just looking for the connection. I hear loud and clear what you're saying, that can be for a first hurdle, that's a really big one. And I appreciate the way that you phrased that. That was helpful for me to hear in that way. But in trying to stay in that model of, we really want this to be a community issue and not a criminal justice issue, the idea is that it will be, somebody else and not us who's helping to look at the housing, the basic needs, all of those other pieces. And that also comes from this idea, and we're seeing this play out more in the juvenile side than I think in the adult side, where there are significant efforts to decriminalize things that we considered criminal in the past. Right or wrong, however these systems developed, the criminal justice system has become an access point or a front door for a lot of other state-funded services. And now trying to pull that apart is really complicated. So I would agree with you from a treatment model, getting people set up with those basic needs, including housing. Obviously, that's really important. That would do more in terms of their long-term success. But I struggle, especially in today's environment, politically, and some of the really progressive things that Colorado is trying to do in this area, to really step back and wonder, like, if I'm doing that in diversion, am I not just furthering the criminal justice involvement or access for those services? And how else can we shift the responsibility and funding? Obviously, that has to go there too. How do we shift that away from the criminal justice system so access to a lot of those things isn't dependent on either committing a crime or being charged with a crime or being convicted? So it's this really interesting tension point, because what we've seen is effective, which is that sort of wraparound service model, seems to be against sort of the political flow of get that work out of the criminal justice system.
And I don't disagree, and I'm not, and maybe I apologize if I explain. So I don't expect the DA's office to do those things. But if you are referring, so you set up your system as opposed to having the touch point, you can have maybe 2 different touch points, people who feel comfortable going to a mental health entity, or you actually have another touch point where you actually have a peer-run program where they actually are that entity who then is sitting down and talking to the person and explaining the program, hearing it from a peer, saying these are options. And also depending upon who is the peers or in that part of that screening intake part, they will then be saying, okay, where are you at? Are you needing housing? Are you doing that? So they're actually becoming almost the quasi peer case manager and doing a referral. And then you're saying, well, here's a diversion potential project, and saying, if they do this, can they come back in a year or whatever, or 6 months, and the case is dismissed? Or if you're just, what does that look like? So some other entity is doing that. I mean, that's what right now I do for probably half of my people who have come to me with pending cases. I basically either go to the DA or to their defense attorney and literally say, here is a pending case. This is what our program is doing. If they're succeeding, not picking up new cases, can this case get, dismissed, and I'll come back in 6 months or 3 months, whatever the nature of the offense is and what the judge is willing to do, as well as the city attorney. So I'm just trying to find a different path, because if you're just handing things out and say, go to a mental health center, I got some very serious individuals with severe mental health issues. And I'll just even say this, I have 2 veterans who, oh my gosh, I can't even tell them to go to the VA even. It is literally building a trust with them in a non-court, non-mental health setting. And I really push the peers for that, to get their basic needs met, so that then the other things can also be addressed. But it also needs housing and bridge housing in our community, so that they can get those access. Otherwise, the whole diversion projects by default end up being people who have, not deliberately, but just the reality of you're unhoused, you're not going to appear in court because you're worrying about what's happening the next day. So you will have people who are of better means in your family and have connections. But a lot of these individuals have, for a variety of reasons, fallen out of favor with family members, or they themselves have issues. So you got to give, and that's why I really push the peer end potentially, and having more training. And this is what I've talked to Vincent about, is I think we need we are doing fairly good job on our peer training in the addiction end, but they need to be cross-trained for our more severely mentally ill people as well.
Yeah, thank you, Gina. And I'm so sorry, but we've gone over time, and I want to be mindful of everybody's time. Thank you so much, Sarah, for the great work and these great questions. I may have some additional thoughts or questions back to you about them, so maybe we can find another time. I put in the chat a link to our rural summit, our national rural summit on mental health and criminal justice, which begins tomorrow afternoon. It's a virtual summit series. Please join us if you can for that. And our presenter for next month's reports and updates meeting will be Sheriff Jamie Fitzsimons from Summit County. Hope you will join us for that, and please do share the word about these reports and updates meetings. Thank you so much, and I'm sure Sarah would welcome any further engagement with the rest of you. If you'd like to set up time with her separately, we can connect you. Thank you all, and take care.